don't let them see their father like this. That's the first thing Dr. Conrad Murray said when Paris Jackson screamed for her dad through the bedroom door. Not call an ambulance, not get help. His first instinct was to keep the children out. Alberto Alvarez was standing right there, and in the minutes before anyone dialed 911, he says Murray handed him something to hide. Alberto Alvarez had worked as Michael Jackson's bodyguard for years. He'd handled crowds, chaos, and unpredictable situations before. Nothing about his job had prepared him for what he walked into that morning. Jackson was on the bed, arms stretched out on either side of him, his eyes half open, his mouth slightly parted. Dr. Conrad Murray was already on top of him, pressing down on his chest, trying to bring him back. It was a scene Alvarez would later describe under oath in a courtroom filled with reporters, family members, and a jury weighing whether the man standing beside him was responsible for what had happened. But according to Alvarez, the moment didn't begin with CPR. It began with something else entirely. Before anyone called for help, Alvarez says Murray had already reached for a handful of small bottles scattered nearby and told him to put them in a bag. Then Murray handed him something else, an IV line, and told him to hide that too. Alvarez didn't question it. In the chaos of the moment, with his employer motionless on the bed, he assumed they were preparing to rush to a hospital. He didn't know yet what he was actually holding or why it needed to disappear before anyone outside that room found out. When Alvarez finally worked up the nerve to ask Murray what had happened, the answer he got was short, almost dismissive. Jackson had had a bad reaction, that was it. No explanation of what kind of reaction, what had caused it, or what Murray had been giving him in the days and weeks before. Only after everything was bagged, tucked away, and out of sight did Murray finally tell Alvarez to make the call. Prosecutors would later argue that those minutes, the ones spent hiding evidence instead of calling for help, mattered more than almost anything else in the entire case. According to testimony, one of the bottled pills inside that bag contained 1,000 milligrams of propofol, a powerful surgical anesthetic. Murray had told investigators he'd only given Jackson a fraction of that amount. The math didn't come close to adding up. Alvarez didn't know any of that yet. He just knew that the doctor standing over Michael Jackson's body was more concerned in that moment with what was in a bag than with what was happening on the bed. It was the kind of detail that seems small in isolation. A bag of vials, an IV line quietly tucked away, but grows heavier with every piece of testimony that follows it. That was the first thing that didn't add up. It would not be the last. Getting to the 911 call wasn't simple, and once it finally happened, what unfolded next revealed just as much about that morning as everything that came before it. When the 911 operator instructed Murray to move Jackson onto the floor, Alvarez says he grabbed the singer's legs while Murray took hold of his upper body. That's when Alvarez noticed something else, something nobody had mentioned to him. An IV line was still connected to Jackson's leg. There was also a catheter in place, something Alvarez hadn't been told about either. Before they could even move him properly, Alvarez had to remove the IV himself, working quickly without any real medical training in a bedroom that had suddenly become something closer to an emergency room. Murray told him to begin chest compression. He would handle the rest, mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, the kind of hands-on emergency response that doctors are trained for. Except Murray said something in that moment that Alvarez never forgot, something that would come up again and again during the trial. It was his first time actually performing it. Sit with that for a second. This was a man who had reportedly been administering a powerful surgical anesthetic to Michael Jackson almost every night for weeks alone in a private bedroom with none of the monitoring equipment a hospital would require. And yet, when the moment arrived to save his patient's life using the most basic emergency technique there is, he was doing it for the very first time in his career. The prosecutor pressed Alvarez on what he saw. Did it appear Jackson was breathing? No, he said. Were his eyes and mouth open? Yes. Did he look alive or did he look dead? Dead, sir. Alvarez said those words on a witness stand under oath with Jackson's own mother and sister sitting in the courtroom, listening every syllable. People in the gallery were openly crying. Rebbe Jackson broke down completely. And through all of it, the paramedics still hadn't arrived. Prosecutors would later calculate the gap as long as 21 minutes between the moment Jackson stopped breathing and the moment anyone outside the house was formally called for help. 21 minutes is an eternity when someone's life hangs in the balance. It's an even harder number to accept when the person responsible for that delay had already spent part of it hiding evidence instead of dialing a phone. For everyone standing in that room, this wasn't a legal argument yet. It was simply watching a man they work for lying motionless on the floor while the person meant to be caring for him fumbled through basic first aid for the very first time. 2 nights before Michael Jackson died, his phone rang in a house thousands of miles away in a different country entirely. Matt Fiddes had known Jackson for years, close enough that back then his ex-wife would answer the phone and hand it straight to him the moment she heard who it was. That was the arrangement in his house. Media couldn't be trusted not to twist a quote, so calls went through her first. But by Fiddes' own account, this particular call was unlike any of the others that had come before it. Jackson didn't sound like himself. His words were rushed, tangled huddled together, almost frantic. When Fiddes asked if he'd taken something, Jackson admitted a doctor had given him a stimulant to help him push through rehearsals, something to keep him upright, keep him moving, keep the production on schedule for a run of 50 shows that, by many accounts, he'd never fully agreed to in the first place. Then came the part that stayed with Fiddes for years afterward. Jackson didn't ask for his manager. He didn't ask for a lawyer, a publicist, or anyone connected to the tour. He asked for a phone number he didn't even have memorized anymore, his father's. According to Fiddes, Jackson said he needed Joseph to come and sort the whole situation out. He said he felt cornered, forced to relearn songs and choreography he'd built over 3 decades, treated, in his own words, badly by the people around him. Fiddes gave him the number. Jackson thanked him, said he loved him, and told him he was going to call his father right away. Before hanging up, he asked to speak to Fiddes' young daughter, someone he'd talked to on the phone many times before. The two of them spoke like it was any other ordinary day. That was the last time Fiddes ever heard his voice. By Fiddes' account, Jackson did try calling his father that night, but Joe didn't pick up in time. The message reportedly sat unheard on an answering machine until it was already too late to matter. This part of the story doesn't come from a courtroom. There's no cross-examination here, no second witness to confirm the details. It's one man's memory of one phone call, retold years later across interviews and podcasts. But if it happened the way Fiddes describes it, then 2 nights before his death, the person Michael Jackson reached for wasn't a doctor standing in the next room. It was his father, a relationship that had grown distant and complicated over the years, reduced in that moment to a phone number someone else had to hand over. And according to Fiddes, that call never got answered in time. Downstairs in the kitchen, nobody had any idea anything was wrong. Kai Chase was Jackson's personal chef, someone who saw him almost every day and had a good sense of his moods, his health, his energy. That particular morning had been a good one. Jackson seemed happy. He seemed healthy. Nothing about the way the day started gave any hint of what was coming. Then Murray came running down the stairs and everything changed in a matter of seconds. By Chase's account, his energy was frantic, almost unrecognizable from the column, composed doctor she was used to seeing around the house. He was shouting, telling her to get Prince immediately. She didn't hesitate. She ran to find him right away. What she didn't know, what nobody in that kitchen knew in that moment, was that upstairs, Michael Jackson was already lying on the floor of his bedroom, unresponsive. Moments later, the children came downstairs, crying, screaming, clearly terrified. Chase and the nanny didn't have any information to give them. They didn't know what was happening themselves. All they could do, she says, was come together, hold hands, and start praying, not knowing what exactly they were praying for, only that something in the house had gone terribly wrong. That's the detail in this story that's easy to miss but impossible to ignore once you notice it. Murray was upstairs, performing CPR for the first time in his career. Alvarez was helping hide vials in a bag. And downstairs, the people closest to Jackson's own children, the ones responsible for keeping them safe and calm, were left completely in the dark, praying without a single fact to hold on to. Chase would later testify that at no point did Murray ask her to call for help, not once. She only learned that Jackson had died sometime after the fact, the same way almost everyone else in his orbit found out, second and after the moment had already passed, with nothing left to do but process it. It raises a question that runs underneath the rest of this story. If Murray had asked for help the instant something went wrong, really asked, not just shouted for a child to be brought downstairs, would the next 21 minutes have unfolded any differently? Chase never got the chance to answer that. Nobody gave her the information she would have needed to try. Bill Whitfield wasn't in the house that day, but what he went through in the hours that followed tells its own version of this story, one that unfolded almost entirely from a distance. Whitfield had been Jackson's head of security for years, working alongside his partner Javan Beard. Together, the two men had spent more time with Jackson day to day than almost anyone else in his orbit during that period, more time than most of the managers, the lawyers, even some of the family members who came and went. But by June 2009, Whitfield wasn't in Los Angeles. He was in Las Vegas, collecting some of Jackson's belongings from the house there, caught in the middle of ongoing contractual disputes with Jackson's management team, weighing whether to head back to LA or stay put a little longer. Then his phone started ringing, not once, not twice, over and over, from friends, from family members, from people who almost never called him out of nowhere. He noticed the pattern before he understood the reason behind it. And then his own mother called. She asked him one question: was it true? He asked her what she meant. She told him Michael had passed away. Whitfield's first instinct was to deny it outright. He'd been in this exact position before, sitting beside Jackson in a car when a radio host mistakenly announced his death on air, and Jackson had laughed the whole thing off from the back seat, joking that people said that about him all the time. So when his mother repeated the same words, his gut reaction was that this was just another false alarm, another rumor that would blow over by the afternoon. He told her he didn't believe it. She told him to turn on the television. He did, and that's the moment it stopped being deniable. Watching Jermaine Jackson walk up to a podium and confirm it himself, live in front of the entire world. At the exact same moment, and millions of strangers were finding out the same news he was. By his own account, everything came to a stop for Whitfield right then. He didn't know what his next move was supposed to be. He wasn't thinking about his job, his contract, or anything professional. He was thinking about the 3 children he'd spent years helping protect, wondering where they were in that moment, what they were being told, and whether anyone close enough was making sure they were okay. That's the detail that separates Whitfield's account from nearly everyone else's in this story. He wasn't in the room. He wasn't part of the emergency response. But for years, his entire job had been standing between those 3 kids and the chaos of the outside world, and in the one moment he couldn't physically be there to do that, all he could do was watch it happen from a television screen, the same as everyone else. 2 years after that morning, Alberto Alvarez had to relive it all over again, this time in front of a jury under cross-examination, with cameras rolling in the courtroom and the entire world watching the trial unfold in real time. He sat on the witness stand for more than 3 hours. It wasn't just his memory of that day being tested, it was his credibility, his timeline, and by extension, a significant piece of the entire case against Conrad Murray. If the defense could plant enough doubt about what Alvarez remembered, they could plant doubt about everything that followed from it. The defense didn't simply ask what he saw, they worked to unravel it piece by piece, detail by detail. Murray's attorney pulled up Alvarez's actual phone records and pointed to something specific. The call log showed he dialed 9911 only 2 minutes after receiving the call to come check on Jackson. The implication was clear, even if it was never stated outright. Was it possible Alvarez had the timeline wrong? Was it possible the sequence of events he'd just described in such precise detail under oath hadn't actually unfolded the way he remembered it? Alvarez held his ground, but the defense had another angle waiting, and it may have been the sharper one of the two. Why had he waited 2 full months after Jackson's death before telling police what he'd actually hidden that morning? 2 months of silence while the world speculated. 2 months while headlines ran wild with theories. 2 months while a doctor's freedom hung in the balance, and Alvarez said nothing about what he'd bagged up and handed over. His answer, when it came, was simple, and in its own way, more unsettling than anything the defense could have scripted for him. He said he hadn't fully understood what he'd been holding until he saw an investigative report on television describing the exact same milky white substance he remembered bagging up that morning. That was the moment it clicked for him. That was when he finally understood what he'd actually touched and why it mattered enough to come forward, even 2 months later than it probably should have. Sit with that for a second. A man who followed a doctor's instructions without hesitation, in the middle of what he genuinely believed was a medical emergency, spent 2 full months not understanding the weight of what he'd been asked to do. He wasn't protecting Murray. He wasn't covering for anyone out of loyalty. He simply didn't know there was anything worth protecting against, not until the truth caught up with him at the exact same pace. It caught up with everyone else on the exact same television screens the rest of the world was watching. Under cross-examination, that's often the hardest thing for a jury to properly weigh. Not a lie, not a deliberate cover-up, just a man who did as he was told and only understood the full weight of it after the fact, same as almost everyone else in this story. In the years since Jackson's death, Bill Whitfield has spoken about one thing more than almost anything else. Not the final hours, not the medical details, but a simpler and, in some ways, harder question: who actually showed up in the years before Jackson died and who only showed up after? By his account, the people who stood at the memorial, who gave speeches, who spoke publicly about their bond with Jackson, weren't necessarily the same people who were around during the difficult years, the years of legal battles, isolation, and constant scrutiny. He says he genuinely can't think of a single celebrity who visited during that stretch of time. No phone calls checking in, no one flying out just to see how Jackson and his children were holding up, away from cameras, away from any benefit to themselves. According to Whitfield, most of the calls that came through his phone, the direct line to Jackson himself, were about business, contracts, negotiations, request, demand. Almost none of them, he says, were personal. There were exceptions, and he's been clear about naming them. Jackson's mother called often, sometimes not even to speak with her son directly, just to ask Whitfield how he was doing and to make sure he knew she loved him. Eddie Griffin, he says, was a frequent visitor, someone who'd fly in specifically to spend time with Jackson, no other reason attached. Chris Tucker, who, by his account, was a real friendship that predated the fame and continued quietly through it. But by Whitfield's telling, that was close to the entire list. Not the wide circle of famous names and industry friends who later stood at a podium during the memorial service. Not the people who, once the cameras turned back on, spoke about their closeness to a man they hadn't checked in on in years. This is Whitfield's own view, shaped entirely by what he personally witnessed during his time on the job. Not a verified account of every relationship in Jackson's life, and not something that can be independently confirmed the way courtroom testimony can. But it raises the same question that's run underneath this entire story. From the bedroom that morning to the witness stand 2 years later, when someone is surrounded by that that much attention, that much fame, and that much noise, how do you actually tell who's there because they care and who's just close enough to be seen standing nearby when it matters? Indianji CTA Levanta, Indianji CTA Liad, Yetutulizi Lenaf Anla, Non Nanga, Olive O, Father 5, Le Volandi Light, Le Dista, O, Lim Zang, Elise, while the Yula, the Zandia in the endless order of Fiddes, no Lobetrem. Nobody in this story had the wit that not Alvarez, Day, no, the Peter, not Alvarez, not Chase, not Whitfield, and not even Jackson's own father, who, by Fiddes' account, never got the message in time to do anything about it. Everyone was holding one piece of a moment that, put together, still doesn't fully add up. Maybe that's the real story here. Not one villain, and not one single moment that explains everything, but a house full of people, each one only seeing a fragment, each one left carrying that fragment for the rest of their lives. If you made it this far, hit like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments of everything you just heard, whose account do you believe the most?